just biologically speaking, you almost have no choice, right? Even if you do try to be a good person, you're still going to be fearful. You're still going to have these silly questions about like, is it safe to walk down the street? Like it's just
Well,
this kind of mainstay.
but the problem in America, there was so many different variations. Let me give you two other examples. I've lived in three states: New York, Minnesota, and Texas. In the 1990s, when I was living in Minnesota, literally my natural family, my biological family, I'm adopted. They lived out in Minnesota, and they were still using. And a lot of Minnesotans were talking about mulattoes,
Mm-hmm.
quadroons, and even Bruce Ario, the poet, will still sometimes refer to negresses. Now, I'm not one of these people. We've talked about a lot of the silliness, a lot of the gender stuff, and all these ridiculous, 182 genders or whatnot. So there is certainly the thing that people can change. Society changes things. You go from Negro to Black to African American or whatnot. So things do change. But this was in the 1990s, and they were still using 1950s language. And here in Texas, I'll just give you two examples of how it's different from New York. I live in a very multicultural neighborhood. I've never had a Black person on either side of our home, but I've had Hispanics, Muslims, and one guy who I think was a Hindu. And there's probably about 10% Black people in the little subdivision I live in. So in some ways, people would say, that's very much like the 1970s kind of Jim films that you were. In the future, people of all colors and races will live together in harmony. In one way, that's true. But in Texas, they will look at that kind of thing. And Texas, with the winter storm, which we talked of, it means everyone. Yes, and well, now you're all equal, but you're just like N-words or just like Mexicans. And the best example of this, of how backwoods Texas is about 12, 15 years ago, that big PDF of my poems that I've sent you and other people, I had made copies of my poems physically, and I found it cheaper to buy a little copier than to make copies of 8,000 pages of whatever that I wanted to copy. It was cheaper to actually just buy the paper and the machine than to go to Office Max or something and copy them there. So I bought this copier. About a month into doing all this copying, it broke down, so I had to bring it to the place where the warranty was. And it was an elderly Black guy who was the repairman. This would have been 10, 15, I was 41. This guy's probably pushing retirement, so he's probably 20 plus years older than me. When I went back 2 or 3 days later when it was fixed, I paid, I don't think I had to pay for anything because it was on warranty. And he said, yeah, do this and this. It worked. This is what happened. Sorry about it. And, and he was very nice. And, I extended my hand to shake his hand. And the guy looked at me and he's like, it took him about 5 or 10 seconds before he sort of like, to shake my hand. This was 2007, 2008. This is in a suburb of Austin, Texas, the most liberal part of Texas, other than maybe El Paso. And yet here still was a guy living in the 1940s. A white man is just extending his hand in just common courtesy for me doing a good job. And I could see he was, and then when I shook it, he beamed. It was like, it was like he had a weekend away with Halle Berry.
Do you still notice that in general? Because I've been trying to be kind of like very, very attentive in my interactions with like older Black people, because I noticed the same kind of strain where there's this kind of very weird, deferential aspect to their behavior, especially if like, I don't know, like something breaks down and, a tech comes out and they're working on something on your house or whatever. Like anybody, like Black people that are like above 50, 60, there's still very often this kind of weird differential quality,
yes.
Right? And this is like even despite the fact that I would be significantly younger than them, and I've been more and more attentive to that. Like, do you still notice that?
Yes, and here in Texas, once you get away from the population centers, after we do this, I'm taking Jessica out to a winery about 40 miles out west. Once you start getting the guys who wear the 10-gallon cowboy hats and you get into the little towns in Texas, you will see rural Black Texans. They still shuffle along as if they're step and fetch it, and they'll still cower at a restaurant. And if they come into a restaurant, the white people who own it will be with the 10-gallon hat. I talked about this when we talked about my book, Working with Teachers, how I was Danny, yet they were Mr. and Mrs. Teacher. And you will still, the Black person will come, well, hello, Mr. Hallop or whoever owns the restaurant. And, the white guy, well, how are you doing, Benji? And he'll act in this very paternalistic child. The Black guy might be 25 years older than him, but he's still treated as a child. And the Black people accept it. And the white people say, well, we, sir, Nigraz. Can I say that? They won't.
So just to fill people in, it's not that I've gone soft on you guys. I've used the actual N word on these videos before, but once this gets uploaded to these other platforms, I don't want them to take down the whole thing.
Yeah. So they instead of saying the N word, they will say Nigra. They'll use that. As that, see, I didn't call him the N-word. I'm progressive. Now these people, the farther out, it's sort of like every 10 miles out from a metro center, you go back a decade. So once you get to about 50 miles out, you're back in Jim Crow era.